So in this video I'm going to cover the biggest piece of Garden Warfare unused content that we've ever seen. This is Garden Warfare 1.5, an unused update for Garden Warfare 1 that would eventually lead on to the development of Garden Warfare 2. Hope you enjoy. So the first thing we're going to talk about is Brainstreet. This was going to be a zombified version of the Main Street map from Garden Warfare 1, and is basically just that. It's essentially a recolor, but it looks like the final objective would have been completely different. There's a lot of different things for this map that has been shown throughout the years, especially at E3, with Brainstreet being the first reveal of Garden Warfare 2 that we ever saw. In fact, the intro that you see every time you boot up the game, that's on Brainstreet. It looks to be a bit different to what it would look like in game just for the trailer, but that is the Brainstreet map. On screen I'll show a bunch of different screenshots and videos of Brainstreet in its initial form. Now this was going to be for Garden Warfare 1.5, which is the main thing we're going to be covering today, which is said to be a version of Garden Warfare 1 where they would essentially just use their pre-existing assets and try and change them up to make it more zombified, along with giving potentially new characters and a new map which we'll get into later on. However, they later decided just to make all of this into Garden Warfare 2, and with that, Brainstreet ended up becoming a Garden Warfare 2 map, before it got scrapped. It got scrapped in favour of Zombopolis, which is in the files called Brainstreet, but a lot of assets from Brainstreet have been repurposed to basically every single map in the game that is zombified. I'll show on screen a little asset that was found outside of Aqua Center, which is actually a segment of point 3 of Brainstreet. You can see this is the part when you have to go up the stairs and then go towards the little tower where the objective will be underneath. And you can see the asset is there, but it is clipping through other things since it's, outside the map. But that is part of Brainstreet. That is actually an asset that has been directly used from Brainstreet itself. Along with this, a lot of the different objectives from Brainstreet have been repurposed into stuff from Zombopolis as well, such as the Disco Diner and the Drone Factory. Both of those became their own objectives. A lot of the other things though have kind of just been repurposed. A lot of the assets have just been reused and used elsewhere throughout the game. What's funny about this as well is that in the reveal of Zombopolis when they were showcasing the Disco Diner, one of the developers says,
So if you guys are Garden Warfare 1 veterans, you might recognize this little thing.
So the developers actually remember the Brainstreet map existing, but obviously didn't remember that they actually never published it. But they do go on to also say this.
So we are bringing that back. So if you played the original Garden Warfare, you'll know that on Brainstreet there was a dancing spotlight that if you get underneath, it will automatically activate one of your taunts, and we brought that back for this one. Don't forget your peel shield.
So as for the final in Brainstreet, obviously it's not finished from the screenshots, but if you look at the layout, it's a lot more similar to what we got in Zombopolis as opposed to what Main Street has. So it's entirely possible that we would have always seen this Zombot boss fight even back in Garden Warfare 1 through Brainstreet instead. I'm not sure, this is all speculation since obviously we don't have a final to look at to see how it would be. So yeah, that's everything we know about Brainstreet at the moment. If there's any more information I'll let you know, but with all that out the way, let's move on to the next thing. So along with Brainstreet being a zombified map, there's also stuff relating to two other maps that have been zombified in Garden Warfare 1 as well, and that is Walnut Hills and Driftwood Shores. Now Cactus Canyon doesn't really have any screenshots, but if there is some that I've missed out, I'll let you know. But you can see on screen there's one image of Walnut Hills to my knowledge, which shows the final point with a zombified mansion, clearly going in the aesthetic of the Zombos mansion from Garden Warfare 1. You can see here it looks a bit different, and that means that the plants would probably have to get into the mansion to win, basically just being a recolor, but that's all we know about Walnut Hills. But a bit more of an interesting thing is Driftwood Shores. I'll show on screen the first image. As you can see, there's a part of the second point where you can see here there's a little billboard and it has stuff relating to the marine biologist gun, which is a billboard shown in Zombified Maps in Garden Warfare 2, which isn't too interesting, but it shows that it is been zombified. But you can see on the other screenshot, point 1 has been done. You can see in the background some of the buildings have been changed, and you can tell that they have actually zombified that part. So obviously we don't know what it looks like really apart from this screenshot, but you can see they was working on a zombified version of Driftwood Shores 2. There is one more map that has been zombified, or to an extent, and it's one that you probably expected, and that is the Garden Centre. So there's one small screenshot of what it currently looks like in the state it was in before, you know, we got the Aqua Centre. You can see it's just a small glimpse of the map with just slightly different texturing on the walls. Not very interesting, but it does show that Aqua Centre was also planned. But yeah, with all those out the way, let's move on to the next thing. So along with maps, there's also multiple characters that were planned for the Garden Warfare 1.5 update. So first of all, if you've seen my last video, you'll probably know this already, the Imp from Garden Warfare 2 was planned. So you can see here, Imp is in a different design, he's got a slightly different mech, and he's also got a different weapon for both Imp and mech as well. Since this character doesn't have many concept art for early phases of Garden Warfare 1, we can speculate that it probably wasn't planned for launch Garden Warfare 1 with foot soldier, scientist, etc. We can also say that this probably wasn't planned for Garden Warfare 2, because it's been put with a lot of stuff for Garden Warfare 1. This entire ArtStation page is dedicated to Garden Warfare 1 stuff in particular. There's not really much for the second game on there, apart from stuff that was planned for Garden Warfare 1 that came to Garden Warfare 2. If you look at his guns, he's got a similar design to the foot soldier instead of what we're familiar with now with the little laser blasters. You can see it's got the little pellets inside, the little paintball gun type thing. And obviously in Garden Warfare 1 there's a lot less lasers on all the characters, it's mostly just paintball weapons, goo, footballs, all that kind of thing. It's more in line with what you'd expect from just basic weapons and that, not really futuristic things, which obviously at this point there's not much futuristic tech in the Garden Warfare universe, so it kind of fits more in line with that. Now along with potential playable characters, we also have multiple enemies that you might have seen in Garden Ops. So to begin with, we have the Robo Zombie. So obviously this guy was used in Garden Warfare 2 specifically for PvE, and you can see he has a very similar design, but he is using different textures. These textures, from what I've seen, are very similar to the ones that the Zombot from E3 uses, so it's once again more in line with Garden Warfare 1's art style as opposed to the second game. You can also see overall it doesn't use very many flat textures that Garden Warfare 2 uses in more of a cartoony art style. It's using more realistic shades and realistic texturing on all the metal. And you can also see it is more in line with the actual Zombot's design, as opposed to kind of being like Zombot but kind of its own unique thing. Now unlike Imp, this does have stuff from the concept art all the way from early Garden Warfare 1 when SWAT Zombie was a thing as opposed to Foot Soldier. You can see, if I show on screen, he was going to be a playable variant, so it's entirely possible that they took that idea, turned it into the Robo Zombie later on, and we have him now, obviously in Garden Warfare 2, not the first game, but it's also possible this was going to just be for PvE now. Final zombie to talk about is the Mech Gargantua or Gargantua Prime from PVZ2, and if you look here compared to what we got in Garden Warfare 2, it is actually more in line with what we're familiar with if you've played PVZ2. He has a little bug bot on his back, which he would fire out and it would spawn a bug bot that would come and attack you. That has textures as well, so we'll kind of bundle them both together. You can see the mech itself has a different design to what we have in Garden Warfare 2, so once again, similar art style to the first game. This, unlike everything else we've talked about, is left over in Garden Warfare 1. I believe it's been left over for a good while. It's got sound effects for the boss slots, along with obviously having a fully functional skeleton, a soldier file that doesn't work, and also multiple different weapons for it too. So unlike the other two, it's entirely possible this was going to be used for Garden Warfare 1 and got scrapped, but this could have also been part of Garden Warfare 1.5. Keep in mind, all this part here is speculation, since obviously, unlike everything else, we don't have much information on it, but now we'll move on to the last thing. So finally I want to talk about Seeds of Time, the biggest map that PopCap have ever made in Garden Warfare 2, or at least according to them, and this was going to be in Garden Warfare 1. So on screen I'll show a few images of what the map was going to look like. You can see the capture points are the Garden Warfare 1 models as opposed to Garden Warfare 2. If you're wondering if these are for different maps instead of Seeds of Time, all of these are labelled as theme parks, so I'd assume that means that they were for the theme park map, which is Seeds of Time. And along with that you can see different iterations of the map, them going through different revisions of each of the objectives. Along with all this in Garden Warfare 2, if you go in the files and look for the mini-maps, which is used for boss mode, you can actually find different things for Seeds of Time, which aren't obviously Seeds of Time, but it's Cactus Canyon, which makes me think that rather Seeds of Time replaced Cactus Canyon in this Garden Warfare 1.5 update, or they built Seeds of Time off Cactus Canyon. Looking at a lot of the different screenshots, one of those two things might be true. You can see as well the lighting in these images are a lot different to what we got as well. It's probably because it's not finished, but you can also kind of tell that it's not very similar to the art style we have in Garden Warfare 2, with it being less harsh on oranges and more just white, but that's, like I said, probably because it's unfinished at this point. Now if you're wondering if this actually doesn't confirm anything that this was related to Garden Warfare 1.5, if you look in early screenshots of Brainstreet while it was still in Garden Warfare 1, you can see stuff relating to Seeds of Time on the billboards. I'll show on screen now what it looks like. It's part of Egypt, an advertisement for it kind of, which means that there's a good likelihood that Seeds of Time was existing while this Brainstreet map was in the files too. So that's pretty much everything for Garden Warfare 1.5, at least from what we know right now. If you did enjoy, feel free to leave a like, maybe subscribe if you want to, and I'll see you all in the next one.